The lease was ending, the boxes were already folded, and the map on the kitchen table looked like a tug-of-war. You wanted the heartbeat of the city, close to your work and the late-night bodegas. Your partner could feel their hometown calling, with aunties down the street and a backyard big enough for a grill. If you're here for building a shared future in multicultural relationships, you already know the stakes live in more than zip codes. On the morning you almost chose out of exhaustion, winter light spilled across the countertop and made the coffee steam look like a small ceremony. You two stood shoulder to shoulder and admitted what neither had said aloud. Place decides pace, and pace shapes the kind of people you get to be. That truth made the question bigger and, oddly, kinder. You started to ask different questions. What do we want our Tuesday nights to feel like, not just our holidays? Where do we want to overhear languages that sound like home? And where do we want to learn the names of new birds, whose parents can help with child care, and whose career might bloom with a shorter commute? Have you asked yourselves what your life should feel like, instead of just where it should be? At first, every answer sounded like either-or. City or hometown, career track or family track, convenience or culture. The conversation ran in circles until you realized that circles are only prisons when you pretend they're straight lines. But there's a gentler door hidden in that hallway. The question isn't which place wins, it's which promise wins. You don't just choose an address. You choose a ritual of mornings, a rhythm for Sundays, and a radius for the people who will become your children's memory. What would this decision look like if you let promises, not fear, lead you forward? Research shows that couples who name values before logistics argue less about the map. Therapists report that when partners can say what matters most, compromises become designs rather than defeats. So you listed values like safety, career growth, cultural belonging, and time with elders. Then you treated the map like a canvas and painted routes that could hold all four. One couple we met chose the city with a promise to spend every other long weekend in the hometown. Another couple moved near family for 5 years with a written agreement to revisit the decision before school started. A third kept city jobs, but rented a tiny place 2 hours away for summers and holidays. Each plan was a braided rope, not a single thread. Which braid would hold best for the season you're in now? You felt a new kind of hope the day you stopped asking for forever and started asking for the next chapter. Seasons give you permission to evolve. The city might be right for a sprint, the hometown perfect for a marathon, and a third place ideal when parents need more care. What one-season decision could make this year easier while keeping next year open? Alignment without erasure became the heart of your talks. You didn't want to lose the music of your mother tongue or the comfort of your partner's neighborhood. So you wrote down non-negotiables like language nights, monthly video calls with grandparents, and a local cultural center within a short drive. You also listed negotiables like square footage, commute minutes, and which holidays you would travel for most. On a spring afternoon, a warm rain turned the sidewalk into a mirror, and you tried a rehearsal of your future. You visited the neighborhood grocery store and counted how often you heard the languages you love. You drove past schools and parks, and you watched the way people used their porches and front steps. Did it look like a place where your future could stretch its legs and breathe? Here's the curiosity that flips the story from fear to design. What if the real decision isn't choosing a place, but choosing a weekly ritual that makes any place feel like yours? You tested Sunday soup, where you cook one dish from each family and call both sets of parents. You tried Wednesday walk, where you leave the screens and talk about what is working and what needs adjustment. Which small ritual would make your new location feel like home by the end of the first month? But location is only one hinge on the door. The next is the balance between careers and the family you hope to grow. You laid out timelines for promotions, certifications, and parental leave like puzzle pieces on the table. You talked through which job had momentum and which had flexibility. You asked not only which paycheck would grow, but which soul would shrink without the right work. A move offered your partner a career leap in a city you didn't expect to love. Another path kept you near your parents, with free babysitting baked into daily life. You realized that money is only one measure of a good decision. Energy, purpose, and support form the other legs of the table, and a steady table is hard to tip. Where is your energy most alive, and who can help you keep it that way? One evening, the conversation cracked. You were tired, hungry, and a message from a recruiter arrived at the worst time. Voices rose and the kitchen floor felt like bad news. Then you did the brave thing. You paused, put a glass of water in each other's hands, and tried a small repair. "I'm scared of losing my field," you said, with your palms open on the counter. "I'm scared of losing my people," they said, eyes soft and steady. You agreed on a concrete step. 1 month to explore the offer, 2 informational interviews, and a pro and con list you would write together. Repair is love with sleeves rolled up. What small, specific action could calm your biggest fear this week? You also talked about seasons of sacrifice. For 2 years, your partner might run a longer commute so you can finish your program. For the next 2, you could flex remote days so their startup can ride its wave. You traded scorekeeping for stewardship. When one of you needed to sprint, the other kept the water cold and the lights on. Make space for data and for hunches. Research shows that couples decide better when they have real numbers on rent, childcare, and commute times. Therapists report that honoring intuition, how your body loosens or tightens when you imagine place A versus place B, matters just as much. You gave yourselves both a spreadsheet you could trust and a walk around the block to listen to your bones. But there's something even quieter holding love together when future plans multiply. You built a we voice for big announcements to family and friends. We've decided to stay in the city for 2 years and reassess. We're moving closer to her parents while we plan for preschool. Unity in language creates unity in memory. Have you tried practicing your news out loud as a team before you share it? Midway through the process, the uncertainty piled up and courage felt thin. That's when whispered hearts. English becomes more than a channel name. It becomes a porch light for people who are learning how to make maps from 2 histories without losing either of them. If you've ever felt alone, staring at a calendar full of unknowns, you're in good company here. What would belonging to a quiet community of planners change about how you carry this decision? You also named the 3rd culture your children would inherit. Not just yours. Not just your partner's. A living blend that will ask for intentionality. You made a list for the first 5 years, bedtime songs in 2 languages, grandparents on video every Sunday, holidays celebrated in both styles, and a wall of photos with names written in both scripts. Language needed its own tenderness. You planned language days, where the house leans one way and then the other, and you promised to talk with teachers about bilingual classrooms if they're available. You learned to model curiosity rather than perfection, offering translations and laughter when a word got tangled. Children absorb what you repeat with warmth more than what you insist with worry. Which simple language ritual could start in your home this week? Family location visits got a rhythm too. You chose to alternate longer trips between both sides while inviting relatives to visit for the in-between seasons. Summer evenings in one place with fireflies flickering above the grass. Autumn weekends in the other, walking through neighborhoods where leaves whisper underfoot. A shared future is a road trip with regular routes. Which route will you draw first on your calendar? Faith and values asked for equal care. You talked about what you each want your children to learn: generosity, hospitality, courage in the face of difference, and tenderness with their own story. You realized that rituals teach values faster than lectures, so you planned a monthly service day in your city and a tradition of hosting friends from different backgrounds around one table. Which value deserves a ritual in your home? Finances became part of the design, not a shadow in the corner. You agreed on a budget for travel to see family and a savings line for emergencies on either side. You added a small fund for cultural education, language classes, books, or dance lessons. Money turns values into calendars when you give it a job. What line item would make your priorities visible on paper? Career relocations continued to hover at the edges. You practiced a template for big offers. First, you checked the values list. Then, you asked who else would be affected and how you'd support the transition. Finally, you named a hard stop, how long you'd test the move before re-evaluating. Contingencies may sound unromantic, but they can make love braver. When friends asked how you make decisions without losing yourselves, you smiled and told the truth. You don't avoid the hard parts. You turn toward them, slowly. You use short sentences when feelings get big. You take walks after long talks, so your nervous systems remember that the world is bigger than a living room. The seasons kept offering metaphors. In winter, you let quiet planning deepen your roots. In spring, you tested small changes and watched what sprouted. In summer, you protected rest and jaw so love didn't become a spreadsheet with shoes on. In autumn, you reviewed what worked and composted what didn't, making rich soil for the next try. A shared vision for children grew into a story with chapters. You chose names that honor both lineages, or agreed to teach the stories behind each name if you choose one from one side. You picked a few core holidays to celebrate big, and a handful to mark in smaller, tender ways. You agreed to let curiosity lead, asking grandparents to share origin stories and favorite songs. Whose story will you memorize this year so your child can hear it at bedtime? You also sketched community, friends who can translate not just language, but expectations and humor, a neighbor who understands that a loud festival weekend is joy, not chaos, a school where difference is normal and welcome. You joined a cultural association not to replace family, but to widen the circle that claps for your child. On a late summer night, the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. You pulled your little table toward the window and wrote a future letter to yourselves, dated 1 year ahead. It began with, "We tried," which made room for both victories and detours. It ended with a short list of what you wanted to feel more often. Calm mornings, meaningful work, nearby laughter, and the courage to change again. There were still fights. Of course there were. A tense call with a parent, a rental application that fell through, a moment when you said something sharp because fear arrived dressed like certainty. But each time, you returned to repair. I'm sorry for the tone. I was scared. Thank you for naming that. Let's try again after dinner. You made repair a ritual, not an ambulance. On the day you finally signed a lease and bought a second cutting board, you walked the new neighborhood like tourists. You found the corner store where the cashier smiled without making it a contest. You passed a park where a kid rode a bike with tassels that flashed like little comets. You counted the languages on the bulletin board and felt your shoulders drop. Whispered hearts. English lives for these exact wins, the quiet victories that don't trend but build a life. The porch lights you notice on a night when the street feels unfamiliar, the way your partner squeezes your hand when you order in a language you'd love. If our stories are a companion while you count steps toward a home that fits, then the work we do here matters. A shared future asked for calendars and courage. It asked for patience with elders who need time to understand. It asked for generosity with yourselves when the first draft of a plan didn't work. And it asked for joy along the way. You practiced celebrating micro-milestones. The first bilingual joke your child told, the night you cooked both grandmothers' soups at once, the month your commute felt like a hallway rather than a maze. When worry tried to take the wheel, you replaced, "What if it goes wrong?" with, "What if we learn quickly?" You set quarterly check-ins like little lighthouses and promised to name what isn't working before resentment collects interest. You kept a shared note on your phones titled, "We are building," because names have power and projects need titles. One autumn afternoon, you drove out to see your parents. The highway shimmered and the trees caught fire one leaf at a time. In the back seat sat a new car seat and a bag of picture books in 2 languages. You felt it then, deep and steady. The future doesn't arrive. You build it while you drive. So ask yourselves the questions that make maps softer. What do we want our mornings to teach our kids about belonging? Which neighbors do we want to lean on when travel is hard? How will we keep grandparents folded into the week even when planes are far? And which part of our story do we want to protect, no matter where we live? On a cool spring evening, rain ticked against the window like a gentle metronome. You opened the laptop and booked 2 trips, one for your partner's cousin's wedding, one for your best friend's new baby. You laughed at the calendar and the chaos. Then you looked at each other and realized it didn't feel like chaos anymore. It felt like a big table with enough chairs. That's the secret the map never tells you. Building a future together is not about perfect landings. It's about practiced landings where the wheels touch down with less jolt each time. You learn the runway. You learn the wind. You learn to keep talking as you taxi toward the gate, hand in hand. At the end of a long day in your new place, you stood barefoot on the kitchen tile and watched dusk turn the walls a softer color. Somewhere down the block, a radio played a song your dad loves. Your partner hummed a chorus from a childhood you're still learning by heart. You set the table, lit a candle, and let the house become what you promised each other on that winter morning. A place where 2 histories can rest and rise. When you're ready, share the one dream you and your partner refuse to put down. Say it in the comments so someone else can borrow your courage. Speak it to each other on a walk when the air smells like cut grass and the future feels near. Then put it on the calendar and give it a date, because hope grows when it has somewhere to be. We're grateful you're here. Whispered Hearts. English is the gentle companion on your commute, your cooking playlist, and the porch where you plan. May your maps be tender, your decisions kind, and your courage renewable. And when the day comes to choose again, may you find that love has given you wider roads and kinder turns. As you close the laptop, Stack the bowls and turn off the porch light. Remember what you already know. A shared future is built in small, faithful acts, and a few big, brave ones. You are allowed to adjust. You are allowed to protect what matters. And you are allowed to rejoice when a plan fits like a well-worn jacket, warm and right in the shoulders. In the quiet that follows, breathe in your progress. You made room for career paths and for grandparents' voices on Sundays. You wrote language into lullabies and values into meals. You learned to shift places without shaking foundations. That is the work of building a shared future in multicultural relationships, and you're already doing it.